Welcome to Conversations on the Coast, San Francisco's premier author interview program. And today I think we have to begin with a title and a reading line. Get you right into it. The title of this book is What to Do About Alice. The reading line, How Alice Roosevelt broke the rules, charmed the world, and drove her father Ted crazy. And the author is with us, Barbara Kerley. The illustrator is Edwin Fotheringham, and it's published by Scholastic Press. Thanks for stopping by.
You bet.
That's a lot of title and reading line, you know?
It is.
Guys might have thought of shortening that for my purposes, but it's really very, very descriptive. It's just the story of Alice Roosevelt, how she lived life and charmed everybody and drove her father Teddy nuts. And this book, I think, like others you've written, is obviously intended for young readers, grades, what to who?
Well, the publisher says ages 4 to 8, but I really think it's got a larger market, probably up to about 4th grade. So elementary kids. Yeah.
But the interesting thing is like your other books, this has an impressive level of research behind it, and there's enough here to provide every reader, no matter his or her age, with new information. Mm-hmm. And that seems to be your style of doing things.
I like that. I like being able to reach a lot of people. And Alice in particular is so wonderful because people from, decades ago remember hearing about her when they were growing up.
Kind of vaguely, yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly. And she's still relevant today because we're interested in the White House and who lives there. Probably now more than ever.
This fascination that you have with corners of history and getting us a message through research has a couple of wonderful examples prior to this book. One title is The Dinosaurs of Waterhouse Hawkins. Mm-hmm. And this is a book about a man and a project most folks had never heard of.
Right. Waterhouse Hawkins was an artist, and he basically introduced dinosaurs to the world. And he did that back in 1853. He built the first life-size dinosaur models. And
Say that slowly again. Life-size
dinosaur models.
Okay.
This is based on science's best understanding of dinosaurs at that time. And the models still exist. They're in London. Mm-hmm. And you can go to Crystal Palace Park and see them for yourself.
I got to do that someday.
You should.
I really, really do. And then you did a book, again, with Mr. Selznick, recent Caldecott Prize winner, Brian Selznick, Walt Whitman, Words for America. And this focused on Whitman, obviously, but especially, I think, his involvement in the Civil War as a non-combatant.
That's right. Walt was very, very affected by the Civil War. He was devastated when the country split in two. And the way that he saw to approach that, not to be a soldier like his brother, instead he went into the hospitals and nursed the soldiers. And he did simple things like bring them an apple, sit and read to them, write a letter home for them, just basic stuff. Some of these soldiers were in the hospitals for months at a time. So his basic goal was just to try and make their life a little bit easier.
And that time and that situation is upon us again.
Right.
And I think we should all be thinking of the simple things that we could do.
Right.
For people in that situation.
Right.
When I think of you, I always think of you as, and this may be wrong, as a researcher first and then a writer? Or is it simultaneous? Or
it's both, but I think you really, both of those things, researching and writing, both start with being curious. And I have to admit, as a kid, I didn't pay that much attention to history. And I think it was basically
trying to catch up, huh?
Well, yeah, but I think as a kid, a lot of history books were kind of boring when I was a kid. The pictures are boring. If you looked at a typical biography back then, they started with the day the person was born. They continued to the day that they passed on. And sometimes people's lives have pockets that are more interesting and pockets that are less interesting. And what I like to do instead is focus on the really interesting stuff and give a little bit of context, but really try and bring those characters to life in a way that's meaningful.
Any particular reason why you decided to focus on this time and this subject?
The 1800s?
Yeah.
I love the 1800s. I think a lot of it for me is this idea that people were really self-made experts. Back then you could teach yourself and become a leading figure in a certain field. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, Waterhouse Hawkins is a great example of someone that became a dinosaur expert, basically just figuring it out as he went along. The person that he worked with, Richard Owen, who created the word dinosaur, he invented that word. he was a self-taught kind of guy, and he became one of the leading dinosaur experts of that century. It's just fascinating to me that you can do that.
Well, these are all kind of noble folks. And in this book, I think my mother would say, you've decided to write about a scamp.
Well, yes. Alice, well, here's a great quote that sets the stage for who Alice was. Theodore Roosevelt once said, I can be president of the United States, or I can control Alice. I cannot possibly do both.
So I guess he chose to be president of the United States, which is something we'll find out if it's true. It's more than time, I think, to get to the story of what to do about Alice. We'll attend to that business when we return.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Follow us on Twitter at Jim Foster COC or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
What to do about Alice? How Alice Roosevelt broke the rules, charmed the world, drove her father Teddy crazy, and gave Barbara Kerley an excuse to do another great book, which is illustrated by Edwin Fotheringham and published by Scholastic Press. Now, somewhere I've heard you say of Alice that, in your opinion, she is one of America's first celebrities who constantly questioned the rules confining women. And when I thought about that, I also thought to myself, well, it's probably true.
Yeah, Alice definitely, she, even as a kid, didn't understand why girls couldn't do what boys could do. There's a great picture in my book where there's a row of young ladies walking down the sidewalk.
Very proper. Very
proper, and they're Miss Spence's Academy, and they're all dressed in identical little dresses. And Alice, at that time, she was 9 when she saw this row of girls. Her big goal was to own a pet monkey and wear pants.
And the picture has her looking out at them from an upper window.
Yes.
With great disdain, dreaming of two of her biggest dreams, herself wearing pants and having a pet monkey.
Exactly.
Which she ultimately does.
She did. She got a monkey
Now,
later.
one of the things about the story that I couldn't get out of my mind was that she lost her mother at birth. So that Teddy's like a single dad, a single parent
right.
to her. And then the other traumatic thing is that until the age of 13, I don't remember from when.
About 9 to 13.
About 9 to 13, she wore leg braces.
Right.
So that you have a kid who's, I guess we would say has a couple of problems to begin with. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, is this rambunctious lifestyle her way of getting away from all of those things?
Well, it's interesting. Poor Alice. Her mother died 2 days after she was born. Mm-hmm. And she actually lived with her aunt, Theodore's sister, for about 3 years. And she didn't remember her mother. So it was kind of this odd thing where, like her nanny would say, there was a picture of her mother over her bed, Alice's bed, and the nanny every night would say a prayer for your little mother in heaven. And yet, on the other side, her father, Theodore, was so upset when his wife died that he wouldn't speak about his wife. So it was kind of this big mystery. But Alice basically didn't want to have people feel sorry for her.
And also, she was caught in the middle of those two emotions.
Right.
Yeah, forget and don't forget.
The way she described it in her autobiography is she didn't want people to say the poor little thing. She just wanted to have fun. Now, the leg braces came later when she was about 9, and I've read varying accounts. Some people think she had polio. Some people think it wasn't that. It was something else. And I'm not sure, to be honest. I'm not sure if historians know. But she had to wear these big, heavy braces that ran from her heel up to her knee. And the braces at that time, I guess they must have had a kind of a hinge on them, but the hinge would, lock up. And she'd be walking, she'd be thrown face first to the ground.
Oh, dear.
But Alice's response, if a kid laughed at her when she was thrown to the ground, she'd take off her leg brace and bonk them over the head with it.
That kind of approach to that type of situation, bespeaks her general approach to life.
Right.
Which is eating up the world. I'm going to eat up the world. Her father, the president, called it running riot.
Right.
So there was some kind of conflict there, I would suppose.
Absolutely. Alice, even simple things like now we take for granted, wearing pants, which Alice actually got to do in 1915, and it made the newspaper, the fact that she wore pants. But even way before then, things like driving a car.
I keep thinking of her as a star of YouTube.
Oh, well, if YouTube had been around then, who knows what Alice would have done. But even simple things like driving a car, which she thought, in driving a car unchaperoned, that made the newspaper as well. It's things now that we take for granted. Alice thought, why can't I just drive a car if I want to?
She was self-taught. She never went to formal school.
That's true. She had a voracious appetite. I think she really mirrored her dad in that way. He also loved to read. But she taught herself astronomy and geology. She taught herself Greek. It's pretty daunting for a kid to do.
Wow.
And Father's response was just every morning, tell me what you learned the day before. And so she was self-taught. She was
always doing tricks. You know, I mean, what you could call tricks. For example, there's one incident in the book where she's leading her siblings sitting on trays and skiing down the stairs in the White House.
Yes.
I would take it that's around age 10 or something.
Well, actually, that was when Father became president, so she would have been 17.
17.
Yes, but Alice I think she saw the White House as a big playground, and things like sledding down the White House steps. She had a pet snake, and she would jump out at Father's visitors with the snake wrapped around her arm.
And at a much later age, she would gather her friends on horseback and go to people's houses in the early morning hours and say, hey, it's time to get up and have fun. Come on.
Yes, the night riders would gallop to people's houses and bellow for snacks.
What to Do About Alice is a complete package with illustrations as breathtaking and as interesting as the story itself. And we're going to look at some of them on the radio when we come back.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Follow us on Twitter at Jim Foster COC or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
This is Jim Foster. It is Conversations on the Coast with wonderful Barbara Kerley is with us to talk about her latest book, What to Do About Alice. How Alice Roosevelt broke the rules, charmed the world, and drove her father, Teddy, crazy. Illustrated by Edwin Fotheringham, about whom we'll be speaking in this segment. But before we get to Edwin and the illustrations, which I think are terrific, somehow, despite all the terrible things she did, terrible in quotation marks, she was her father's favorite, and he got to see her, and I guess even use her, as a political ally.
Yes, indeed. I think that he really saw in her kind of a kindred spirit. He was very much a go-for-it kind of guy. And Alice, in her own way, even though she was constrained by rules that society placed on young girls, she couldn't go for it in the same way that he did. And yet she still, within the confines, did that.
That's a marvelous observation. Yeah, that's probably where it does come from. He saw himself in her wildness,
her gusto for life, and for experiencing what she could, what life offered her. Yeah, she was definitely she was an asset to him politically. The more popular she was, the more popular he was. He actually sent her on a couple of goodwill missions, and it was very helpful. She went to Puerto Rico, and later he wrote her and said, would have been, I think it was 1901 or 1903.
Something like that,
right?
Yeah.
Your presence was accepted as a great compliment. People were very happy to see you down there. And she also went to Asia back when he was trying to broker a peace treaty between Japan and Russia. And again, she was very, very popular there. And it helped his career. And then at the end of his career, after he had left the presidency and was trying to find a place for himself, she again was like an advisor to him. Mm-hmm. And I think one of his most trusted advisors at the end of his life.
Amazing. Mm-hmm. Amazing. Now, this fellow, Edwin Fotheringham, has done some wonderful illustrations. Who's Edwin? Do you know anything about him?
I don't know much. I know
you never worked together in this?
No, this is actually his first book.
Wow.
He's done a lot of work, though. He's done a lot of work in magazines, and I think in book covers as well. And some really, major magazines. He's done some of the really cool illustrations at the beginning of articles.
There's a phrase in this book which has a wonderful 2-page illustration around it. And the phrase is, "Now, pig."
Yes.
And this has to do with the fact that every morning Alice cried out, "Now, pig," until Teddy would give her piggyback down to the breakfast table.
And her father wrote about that in a letter, that realizing that Alice would have been 3 or 4 years old, that she didn't realize how it sounded, but basically she was saying, "Pig, give me a ride down to breakfast."
I don't know. There's also an illustration in here, and again, I think almost all the illustrations are 2-page jobs. Mm-hmm. And there's this wonderful illustration which I've written as a caption, "Freedom." And it's a picture of Alice riding a bicycle, which Teddy wanted her to get order that she would be less cautious.
This is after she got her leg braces off.
The leg and the picture shows her throwing the leg braces over her shoulder, speeding down a hill.
Uh-huh. Well, it's a wonderful combination because Teddy wanted her to ride the bicycle to get more healthy and robust. Mm-hmm. And if you know about his career, his lifetime, he had asthma as a child and was very sickly, and kind of rebuilt himself into a healthy person. And so he really praised physical activity. But what I love about the illustration, this is true, Alice used to steer a bike with her feet. And so she'd be screaming down from DuPont Circle down the streets of Washington, D.C., steering with her feet.
Yeah, the feet are not on the pedals, they're on the...
Right.
Right.
And this caused her mother to think her stepmother to think she was unruly.
Well, as much as Teddy got to admire the many things that she did, there was also a cost to it, which is captured in another wonderful full-page spread with a, if you will, caption, "Oh, Alice." Mm-hmm. And this shows some of the things she did.
Alice was in the paper all the time. Mm-hmm. People, in fact, I read this great quote, Helen Hayes remembered as a child trying to look up and find things about Alice out in the newspaper. People would look in the papers for the latest escapades. You know, we see that now with celebrities who behave badly. And although Alice didn't do what today's celebrities do, she had her share of breaking the rules. And so there'd be things about how she didn't go to church, how she was eager to see the horse races start. They had a great quote where she said she saved the dances from languishing to death.
And then there's one picture in here which looks, like more presidential life, where she's being led down the aisle with Dad at her wedding. 800
guests came to the White House to watch Alice get married.
But then on the left-hand page, you, the author, detail the gifts she got, and of course, they include a snake and a monkey.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's true.
So Alice has it all. And this book has everything about Alice. It's called What to Do About Alice. It's written by Barbara Kerley. This has been Conversations on the Coast, and I'm Jim Foster.
Follow us on Twitter at Jim Foster COC, or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.